Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, I Insider Indianapolis Star. This is Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. That microphone over there is Mike Niziolek. The microphone over here is Zach Osterman. This is Mind Your Manners. Forgive me, we're not live today due to some technical issues we're working on behind the scenes. But the live podcast will be back as soon as possible. I know with the compressed week, Mike. I can't speak for your schedule, but mine is a bit hectic. So we wanted to fit this in where we could. And we're talking. It feels very difficult at this point to talk about IU football without talking about the Illinois game, because that is, as much as that has loomed over a lot of the discussion of this team in the offseason and leading into the preseason, it's becoming ever more real now. I do want to look back at Kennesaw State briefly. I think it's a game where Curt Cignetti saw a lot of what he likes. I think it's a game that Curt Cignetti got to emerge from maybe in his ideal position, which is feeling like he saw a lot of good things from his team while still having a lot that he can sort of admonish them for or push them on, talking about the chunk plays they allowed, talking about how the game is still kind of in the balance a little bit, even into the third quarter. I thought he felt good about the week 1 to week 2 growth in the same breath that he was able to say, but we're nowhere near where we need to be, and I'm going to keep pushing the carrot a little bit further out in front of my team, because of it.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that there's any scenario where he wouldn't be able to do that or wouldn't. I mean, Western Illinois, there were still things he's like, we need to fix. I don't think there's any scenario where he's going to come out of a game and be like, we got it right, boys, let's go. Like, that's it. It's like, that's just not how he's going to do it. He's always
you have completed football.
Right. It's not like we passed the test and it's over. Good night. That's just not how he's wired. And like you said, there were some legitimate concerns in terms of I think the one that stands out, like you mentioned, is the secondary getting gashed for, a series of long plays against a team that, really couldn't pass the ball before that, and struggled all game long. So, I mean, those were startling, and just how easily they picked things apart. Now, his counterpoint to that, Cignetti's, was a lot of that had to do with their no-huddle offense that they probably won't see as much of going forward, in terms of having to rush to get lined up, because that's where guys are having problems. But it's something obviously that they need to fix.
And it also, it hits at a part of the field that we've had questions about since the offseason, which is that secondary, and Cignetti, like a couple of us, including me, kind of tried to draw him into a question over whether he's concerned about structure or he's concerned about individual mistakes. Basically, does he see anything in the structure that is breaking down, not just individual mistakes? And he just said, well, every mistake is a result of someone screwing up like that, but that he didn't want to get kind of pulled into this sort of discussion of, maybe it's something that we need to try to do differently with the personnel that we have or anything like that. And he also mentioned the quarterback change. I think that kind of threw him off, just at least I think he did a little bit. He might've mentioned it Saturday. What I would say in response to his sort of we're not going to see no huddle a lot this season. You're going to see more of it if you can't prove that you can shut it down. You're going to see more of it than you might think.
I think you meant that specific pace.
Sure, not everybody's built to do that, but still, you understand my point that it's you're going to see more of it if teams think they can hurt you with it. Essentially,
sure.
It's funny because the first game is defined by 2 big chunk plays. And basically everything else for the defense is really pretty good, is really pretty dominant. The second game, it feels like everything that's not the chunk plays goes pretty well for Indiana. They forced a couple more turnovers. They were living in the Kennesaw State backfield. I think they had 14 tackles for loss. I don't know if you have the pressure numbers handy, but that was a pretty significant number as well. And so you're able to sort of say that, moving on from Old Dominion, you got even better in some of the elements of disruptiveness and line of scrimmage control that you'd want to see from a front six that's obviously sort of changed its face a little bit in the last 12 months. But then you still have these back end concerns, and back end concerns weren't the only reason you gave up those long touchdown runs in week 1, but they were certainly part of it. And then you see a team that challenges you more passing the ball than what Old Dominion was really able to do, was able to have some very real success. And, Signetti points out it's not until that sort of like like mid third quarter ish play where Jamari Sharp sends his man inside. Safety, according to Signetti, safety help's supposed to be there, and it's not. Then Sharp can't recover. He gets thrown over top of. But as he's tackling the Kennesaw State receiver, he strips the ball and holds on to it. Indiana turns that around and drives not the length of the field, but a good, healthy drive, I think about 70-something yards. Touchdown. Now it's 28-9, and that starts the 31-0 end to the game for Indiana. But Signetti's point is, if Sharp doesn't make that play, it's 1st and 10 Kennesaw State at what, maybe like the 25 or so, and they get a touchdown there, and suddenly it's a 21-16 game, or 21-17, depending on how Kennesaw State wants to handle the 2-point or whatever. So this is where I feel like Signetti still has a justifiable carrot to sort of dangle out in front of his team and say, I know that you're right. Like, no coach is ever really that satisfied. Like, the reason we sort of like glorify these mythological stories of the few times that coaches just sit back and say, oh, we've got this, is because it doesn't happen very often. But I do think that Signetti has.
Why is it the carrot and not the stick? I don't. Why is Signetti's
the carrot? The carrot you hit with the stick, but the carrot stays out in front of you. The carrot's what keeps you moving forward.
Well, why wouldn't the stick move you forward? Because you're getting hit and pushing forward.
Well, I'm just trying to be a little bit more modern, I guess. I believe in the carrot. I believe in the carrot more than the stick. But you understand my point, is like Signetti's not manufacturing concerns here. Like he has some very real stuff that Indiana's got to work on.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. And there was plenty in the first game that, I don't think you're not going to be like the when you're judged on it won't be this week. And maybe that's a good transition, but the Illinois games where this all stuff needs to kind of get fixed and you got to put together these improvements anyway. I mean, the competition has been a step below what it'll be here in 2 weeks. Like, it is what it is.
Let's not move on to Illinois just yet, although we are going to talk about that again, kind of in the framing of the wider thing. I don't mean to make this all about the quarterback, but I do think if Fernando Mendoza was going to be such a talking point after week 1, I think he does need to be a talking point again after week 2. Obviously, I think he would tell you far from perfect, but a lot better in week 2 than in week 1. He throws 18-25, which is a 72% completion rate, 245 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think his PFF grade improved from somewhere in like the mid 60s to like 78, 79, that range. So you can see growth in the way that maybe sort of people analyzing his overall performance and of course, I mean, listen, you can just look at those numbers and just recognize he had a better day. But I thought you saw a more comfortable Fernando Mendoza, a Fernando Mendoza that was more sort of on top of his reads and things, had better timing, had better presence in the pocket, and of course was getting better connection with, the receiver who's, I mean, it's probably fair to say is most important within that passing game. Elijah Surratt has 3 touchdown catches on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, and there too was still, I mean, there was a couple drops and some of the timing just it's still not right. It's not. I don't necessarily think a product all on him. I mean, he was kept pretty clean. I think I was looking at it. He's only pressured on 5 of his 28 dropbacks. So I mean, again, tons of time to throw the ball. But I mean, I think when they talked last week about kind of his progressions, they were definitely better, and he was more decisive. And his ball placement was better. He made that same fade throw that he missed on a week earlier to Elijah Surratt in the end zone. They connected and kind of made the corrections. We talked about that after the game. So, I mean, you did see the growth. And I think we talked about before the season, and you kind of said like, oh, he's going to take off and be this great thing these first 3 games. And I said, whoa. Not as much experience as Curtis Rourke, and they're going to have to work some of the kinks out. And
there's some real post hoc ergo propter hoc going on right here, man. This is no. We are making versions of events fit our arguments at heretofore unseen levels on Mind Your Banners.
Cliff Notes version of what you said. And so No, but I think what you've seen is they are
We're gonna run back the transcripts at some point on this.
Transcript. You can do that. You've seen them work out some of the kinks, and it was, I think these 3 games were important to sort of get him ready for a level for the in the upcoming Big Ten schedule, especially when they go on the road, it's Iowa and Oregon, to sort of have these reps under his belt, to work these things out now, as opposed to like the first week of season, we were kind of thrown into it, and still trying to find that chemistry with Elijah Strouder, still trying to find that timing, or get used to the pocket and things like that. So this has been good for him. And I think you've seen, he'll get one more chance, maybe 2 quarters on Friday, to sort of get ready here. Your mic is off. And now it's gone. He's ditching the mic. Now he's searching. This is play-by-play. Confused man.
There we go. My microphone just decided to stop working mid podcast, so we're going to shift back over to the computer. That's live radio, folks. Even though we're not live, that's unlive radio. That's tape delayed radio. You talk about like him getting 2 quarters. It almost, and I wrote an insider sort of suggesting at least that this is what I think or what I believe at the beginning of the week, which is that if you're Indiana, you really did need to see it through the first 2 games because, as you talk about, number one, and I'm not trying to demean Indiana State, but like you're not going to get a test from Indiana State that you weren't going to get from Old Dominion and Kennesaw State. And number 2, as you say, the ideal for Indiana is probably that he doesn't play more than maybe 2. And I know Curt Cignetti said he left his starters in a little longer on Saturday. He said they need reps. These guys haven't played a lot of football together. On the other hand, I would point out the minute he sees his quarterback in a moment of peril, he swaps him out. Like the minute he sees Mendoza take a shot around the knees, he thinks, okay, that was too close for comfort, and literally swaps quarterbacks mid-drive.
Yes, but also that was a self-inflicted one. Like when it was a first down where he didn't need to do that. And
sure, I get it, but my point is, I think in Curt Cignetti's mind, the whole like they need reps argument like lasted until it didn't anymore. And I don't think he's leaving his starters in artificially longer than he needs to Friday night in a way that he was clearly prepared to do Saturday afternoon. And so not only are you not maybe going to get much challenge from Indiana State that you haven't already seen from the first 2 opponents of the season, you're also probably in a situation where you're trying to get some of these players, both Fernando Mendoza and some of the other quote unquote sort of stars or A-teamers around him out as quickly as humanly possible because of what you've got coming up after that. So it felt like, to me anyway, you wanted to see a game from Mendoza in at least one of these first 2 where you sort of said, okay, yes, he's in the right place, the right physical space, the right mental space. He's as ready as he can be essentially for Illinois. Someone else who it turns out will be ready for Illinois, provided he's healthy after this weekend, is Lewis Moore. I joked with you before we should get this segment sponsored because it seems like we're talking about Lewis Moore at least once a week right now, but can you give us the latest on Moore, because he now has at least 2 more weeks of eligibility?
Yeah, they basically delayed. He had a hearing scheduled for this morning at 9 that was delayed 2 weeks to the 14th or 24th. And the NCAA and his attorneys basically agreed that they would extend that the NCAA wouldn't punish Moore and wouldn't punish for Indiana for playing because the TRO, I don't know if that means it's like technically extended, but it was kind of going to expire obviously the day of the hearing. But I think it was some procedural things in the back end that caused kind of a delay for the NCAA that they needed to push it back. And so they kind of came to an agreement. So really it's the status quo for Moore in the sense that he still needs to, the NCAA is not dropped its motion to dismiss. They're still pushing and fighting this, and so that'll be done on the 24th, and he needs to win a further injunction to keep his eligibility for the rest of the season. But in the short term, he'll be available for this game on Friday night and for the one against Illinois. So it helps in that sense, and he's obviously made some impact plays. I think he leads the team in tackles and has one of only 10 players in the country with multiple interceptions. So, he's done some nice things, and he'll be available here. As Indiana, Curt Cignetti mentioned, has some health issues back there. Byron Baldwin's still did not play in week 2 with an undisclosed injury. It's been listed as day-to-day by Kurt Signetti, but we don't know sort of what's the holdup. And so, if he's healthy, this would be a good spot to get him some run because, I mean, he hasn't played yet this season, and they could need him. And, I mean, they just need depth there. I mean, they will need him, not necessarily to start, but they still need depth.
And this, at least if you're Indiana, gives you a little bit more runway to figure out what you do if you do lose Lewis Moore, that you have now 2 more games, a little bit more time, as you talk about, to get somebody like Byron Baldwin healthy, and just a little bit more time. If you're going to cross-train somebody at safety, or if you're going to reimagine the rover position, you can do a little bit more of that. And, I mean, I'm actually kind of interested to see what we see this weekend, because this would be the kind of game where if maybe – you had to sort of rip up your plans and start over and say, I don't know, Rylan Gandy is going to be the rover, and we're going to play it more as like a trim nickel type thing a lot. And we'll go to, 3 linebacker sets when we need to play heavier against the run, whatever. This is the kind of game where maybe you'd be more comfortable throwing it in there and letting it fail a little bit to see what it looks like, because you probably have the wiggle room to not, to not really pay for it much. But I think it at least gives Indiana more runway to sort of figure out what it's going to do if, and, this still is an if, Lewis Moore winds up kind of out of the picture eventually because of the eligibility concerns.
Well, the example from last year, I think Elijah Hardy used that Western Illinois game as sort of a stepping stone to say, like, look, I'm here and I'm ready. And so is there a guy, I mean, not just in the secondary, like it could be anybody, like, the receivers, Charlie Becker's a young guy that sort of, been talked about as a guy that really has breakout potential, scored his first touchdown last week. Those are moments, those guys.
First touchdown catch.
Respect him. Sorry. And those are moments that are important and could prove to matter down the line. And they just haven't had, like I said, I think the backup defense only played like 3 snaps against Kennesaw State, or most of it. So you need to get some of those guys some playing time for sure.
This all kind of feeds into Indiana State, which in a lot of ways, I think it's fair to say feeds into Illinois. Indiana, I believe I saw our good friend Chronic Hoosier tweeted that Indiana opened as a 48.5-point favorite against Indiana State. At that level, I'm surprised there's even a line, frankly. But you don't want to be too dismissive of anybody. I get that. I mean, I've seen Indiana State take Indiana to a 1-possession game before, like it's happened. On the other hand, it sounds like Indiana State's without its starting quarterback. Obviously, this already felt like a very one-sided affair to begin with. And the compressed week this week sort of masks the fact that you are going to be working with an extra day next week when you're getting ready for what stands as, one of the most important home games in recent memory for Indiana. I mean, we a few of us have kind of been trying to rack our brains over the Illinois game, but let's assume Illinois also holds serve and beats Western Michigan this weekend. Indiana hasn't beaten a top 10 team at home since 2020. It hasn't beaten a top 10 team at home in front of fans since 1967. A lot of even sort of the crowning moments in this program's sort of modern history, whether you want to talk about the height of the Bill Mallory era, or you want to talk about what Tom Allen achieved, or you want to talk about what Kurt Signetti's done, a lot of the biggest moments have actually come on the road. And, this is a sellout in front of, a nighttime crowd at Memorial Stadium. And if anything, it almost feels like Indiana's greatest enemy Friday night is that Friday night isn't next Saturday, and that you still need to be productive. And I think Indiana can play poorly and still win comfortably, but the idea that you still need to be making every single game opportunity productive, because as you said, you don't know when an opportunity for a player leads that player to have a breakthrough of some kind that changes the trajectory of your season, even slightly, and you add those things up over 12 games and it makes a difference. So it does just feel like if you're Indiana, there isn't, I think, an inherent awkwardness to Friday night that you've kind of got to navigate, that you've got to show a certain professionalism about, I guess, as much as anything else.
First, I'd like a history lesson. So I pulled this up. So you're talking about the 2012 game was the 1-possession game against Kennesaw State.
That sounds right. 24-17. Yeah.
And then the next year was the response was that so then they allowed 35 points, but scored 73. So you saw a 100-point game. Was that a direct response to they wanted to put up as many points as they can to erase that from the?
No, that team was just what a lot of those Kevin Wilson teams were. Like it was defensively challenged, both in terms of sort of like strength and depth.
Well, so what happened in 12 that it was so close? Was it actually close, or was it?
Let me remind myself of that 2012. One of the first things that happens that season, and that was a weird year in general. I'd have to pull up the box score from that. They were still a very young team that season. That was Trey Roberson would have started that game. They had 2 new quarterbacks behind him. And the next week they went to UMass and beat them 45-6 at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, and Roberson broke his leg. And then if you actually look at like the string of results after that, they have a bunch of 1-possession losses. Like that team could very easily have gone like 7-5 or at least 6-6 with a little bit more fortune. But number one, in fairness, I'm remembering this a bit more now. That was a decent Indiana State team that were ranked. That was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the early Trent Miles teams, and Trent Miles winds up going on to have some success or have enough success to get the Georgia State job and doesn't wind up lasting there. But the point is, like, that was Indiana State was probably in a better spot then. And Indiana was, Indiana was a team fresh off of a 1-11 season that was still figuring a lot out under a second-year head coach. So, it was like 12, 13, 14 was, for a variety of reasons, kind of a fascinating, weird period in IU's history, between sort of being a program that didn't have enough resources to compete and probably just didn't prioritize the sport enough to compete, to one that was trying to get to a place where it took football more seriously. It came with some growing pains, but it was interesting to watch, that's for sure.
Those defenses, the numbers those defenses put up that 2-year stretch or 3-year stretch are amazing. When you look at the final scores, just that
it wasn't great.
They scored 46, but the other team scored 60. Amazing. So,
they had a loss to Michigan that I think was 63-49. That year, in 2012, they lost to Ohio State in Bloomington 52-49, and I think they were down like 17 points, scored a touchdown, converted an onside kick, scored another touchdown, and then like we're not far from grabbing another onside kick. It was a weird time. And then the next week they lost to Navy. So it was a strange time. There's no question. But that was 20
no parallels to this week's matchup.
You what?
I said no parallels to this week's matchup from 2012.
No, I don't think so. No. Second-year coach.
There you go.
There's one. There's a second-year coach. It really does feel like, it just, I think there is going to be almost this collective exhale, I think, at the final whistle Friday night, just at the idea that Indiana can finally turn its attention to the thing that everyone's been talking about for weeks. And certainly what's building up now that we know it's going to be a night game. We've known it's a sellout. It's probably going to be a top 20 game. It's going to be a game that I think, from the perspective of what people are watching for Indiana, it's going to be a game that people watch and say, okay, can you do it? Like, are you for real? This is your first chance to prove it. Or was last year just a fluke that's never going to be repeated again? But again, we're having these conversations about Illinois and Illinois week when Indiana hasn't even played Indiana State yet. This game is just it feels so much like the last game of an NFL preseason, where you have like almost like predetermined pitch counts for players and some I doubt Indiana will hold starters out. Certainly anybody who's like a remote injury concern, I think, doesn't play in this game. But I wouldn't be shocked if there is an all but predetermined threshold at which Indiana's sideline sends in the number 2.
Well, I think it's points, right? Like if you get to a 35-point lead, you're done, right? Or something like that. I don't necessarily think it's minutes in the game. I think it's just what the scoreboard says. And if you can get to 50 after the first quarter, you can come out of the game. That's not probably realistic, but maybe. I mean, Oregon almost did it against Oklahoma State, so who knows? I think the interesting part. I think the part that these games. Look, I mean, you can say what you will about the scheduling part about it, but it's very clear that the fans are not finding these opponents all that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what I think the downside of all of this. That look, you have momentum as a program. I think there really is interest, and I think there really is excitement, but it is a hard sell to convince fans that. Even though that game against Kennesaw State, I think is included in this, that it was closer at the end of the first half than it probably should have been. That just the attendance did not match where this team's at, and I don't think on Friday night. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I thought there were more tickets available for this game than there were for the Kennesaw State game, and the attendance wasn't what did I say? We said sparse was the description of the attendance on Saturday.
Yeah, the crowd felt smaller but stuck around longer, which I mean they might have just had more to enjoy, frankly. Indiana finally started kind of moving and scoring the ball. But I mean, no, Friday night football is not for attendance. Friday night college football has never been and will never be designed around the
an earlier kick than it was the last couple of years, right? I mean, 6:30 wasn't 7:30. So I mean, like, I don't know. It just feels like a game, like you said. It just like run this through, get this done quickly enough, and then we'll move forward. And the downside of that is, I think that the environments are not, what Indiana would want it to be, but it's the nature of the thing. But they're not overlooking the game. But I mean, look, you have such a built-in talent advantage. What do you say, right? I mean, there's nothing. That's what these are. That's what these matchups are. They're easy wins or just wins that you can bank on.
Well, let me just like frame it to you this way then. And I'll give you the last word because we do have a slightly abbreviated podcast this week. Like, what do you think beyond just sort of saying like they win comfortably, they come out of it healthy? What do you think Indiana can get out of Friday night?
I mean, like I said, other than the backups having some, seeing what you have at certain positions. I mean, we saw a little bit of Alberto, but I mean, he's a guy that if you're going to count on as your number, he is a guy that you're counting on as your number 2. Any reps that he gets will be good reps, right? I mean, if he looks good, bad, or otherwise, it's still experience under his belt, and he is your number 2. So I do think any work that he gets is a positive step, and depending on Fernando's trajectory, is he kind of the starter in waiting? We don't know. I mean, obviously, a lot to play out, but those are important. I think the defense. You're thin at certain spots, and getting some work's important. We've talked about safety. They haven't rotated much at the defensive line. Getting some of those backups in, a guy like that changed positions, Quentin Clark. Maybe he saw the field on against Kennesaw State, but just getting reps, and those are, it sounds kind of weak, I guess, but that'd be the main takeaway. But anything the starters do, or you're not going to put too much weight into it, right? Because they're just going to be so overwhelmingly more talented. I just feel like the second half will be sort of I think where you get the value from seeing a lot of those guys that haven't played and that just haven't had the experience yet.
He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners for September 10th, 2025. We'll be back hopefully live. We're going to see what we can do about the technical issues between now and then, but we will be back in some form on Friday night. But until then, for the Indianapolis Star and the Bloomington Herald-Times, thank you so much for watching. Remember to go to heraldtimesonline.com and indystar.com/sports to read everything that we produce day in, day out. And please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We will talk to you soon.